Hey folks, welcome back to My Kitten Reads. I'm Eleanor and this is my January reading wrap up. I apologise for my state of dress. I got into my pyjamas after I got home from the gym, forgetting that I hadn't yet recorded. So, you get me in pyjamas. But yes, so I did read 9 books in January, which is 10 is technically however many I need to read to keep on pace for my end of year goal of 120, but 9 is pretty damn good, and I started a few more as well. So, I only actually finished 3 from my TBR, from the TBR video I made, but I did start a couple more from that list. So, and then there were some randoms, as always. But I'm pretty pleased with how I did this month. So, to start the year. So, what did I read? Well, the first thing I actually finished was Superior Connections by Laurie Lillian and Layla Johnson, and that's a Pride and Prejudice variation that I hadn't read before, because I am only including ones that I'm reading for the first time. And in this one, which was published in 2024, the Bennets have a rich aunt who comes to see them and decides she's going to take them under her wing and defend them from the people who are insulting them, aka Darcy, aka Bingley's behaviour towards Jane. She's not really impressed with his spinelessness, and so this of course changes the way the Bennets interact with the rest of society, because they have this aunt who is ready to defend them and take the older girls to London and all that kind of thing. So that's always fun. Then I read physical book of Knives and Night Blooms by Tansy Rain Roberts. This was on my TBR, and I read it pretty quickly in the month. So this is the novel that she published in 2003 that I had completely missed entirely, but I bought myself a physical copy when she did her Kickstarter last year. And so this is the first in the River Divine series, and it's essentially, it's sort of a, some of it's very Greek mythology, but some of it's really, really not. And whatever world that she's invented, like, some of it's really Greek mythology, some of it seems almost Eastern, some of it is, there's an inn named after a wombat, which amused me terribly. So clearly there are wombats in this world. But essentially it all revolves around this river. And these 3 assassins, which was supposed to be 4 assassins, but one was late, so the spell ensnared a poor hapless wannabe guard, get ensnared by this spell to protect their target, who's on her way with, she wasn't allowed to bring her own guards, she wasn't allowed to be guarded by people from the kingdom she's going to join, but she's got to make her way across the river for her new husband. And so she's ensnared these assassins who are in the service of the god of death. There's gods, there's magic, there's an adventure, there's a poor hapless fellow who just wants to be a guard, but he's failed the examinations multiple times because he sort of has dyslexia. But he's just been dragged along on this adventure by accident. But it's very amusing, a lot of fun, and I really, really enjoyed it. There are sort of, I think there are queer characters. Yeah, there are definitely queer characters, so that's great. That's for my goals as well. And it's a physical book, which is also for my goals. So then I finished I Shall Wear Midnight by Terry Pratchett. So this book I actually started in 2021. I think it's like the 4th Tiffany Aching book. And I got about halfway through it, and then I put it down because it was making me really, really uncomfortable. And the thing that was making me really, really uncomfortable was the fact that fear and bigotry against witches was being sown into Tiffany's community, and it was affecting her. And at the time, I couldn't handle it. But apparently, nearly 4 years later, I was able to pick it up. And once I'd refreshed myself as to what the plot had been so far, I zipped through the second half of it. Totally fun. Appearances by Granny Weatherwax. Always love the Wee Free Men. And, you know, Tiffany got her business done. So yeah, I think I have one more Tiffany Aching book to go, but I'm glad that is off my currently reading pile. That was an ebook though. So that was great. Then I read, this was on my list of my TBR list, On Red Station Drifting by Aliette de Bodard. This was, I thought this was going to be a reread, but I may not have actually read it. So this won the Hugo Award for Best Novella the year that I started both using Goodreads and reading for the Hugo Awards, and yet it's not on my list of things that I read that year on Goodreads. And I didn't recognize any of it when I was reading it. So is it possible I sort of thought I read it via osmosis because everybody was reading it and it's one of the really famous ones in Aliette de Bodard's Zuya universe? Possibly. So it was essentially about a woman who had to flee her position, of her high-ranking position, before an invasion force came in, but also because she had spoken up against the Emperor. And she's gone back to her family's space station and tried to integrate, but not very well, into the family, which is being held together by someone who married into the family, because all of the high-ranking members of the family have been sent off to war by the Emperor. And they clash a lot. And things don't go very well. But yeah, it was interesting. I enjoyed it. So I can't remember off the top of my head which Zuya book comes next. I think it's a novel. I think I've bought it, so I need to double check that. That will probably go on my February TBR. But we will see. But that is also a book that goes towards my goals, because Aliette de Bodard is of Vietnamese heritage. I don't think there were any significant queer characters in this particular book. That universe often does, but I don't think there were in this one. So then I read This Is Not a Laughing Matter by Sydney Sallier. It's a Jane Austen Pride and Prejudice variation. It's actually been around for a while, and usually I've read most of Sydney's, but this is one that just hadn't grabbed my attention. And I'm actually trying to remember. That's right. So in this particular one, it starts with Darcy's proposal to Elizabeth at Hunsford, and she laughs in his face because she thinks he's joking, which sort of stuns Darcy, and they start to unravel why she thinks this is a joke. And he's quite taken aback about the fact that she thinks this is a joke. So funny that she's laughing at him to his face. So essentially it's taking that Hunsford conversation in a completely different direction. Instead of getting angry at him, she just laughs in his face. Then I read another P&P variation called Chasing a Dream. I think this one, Darcy and Elizabeth meet as children when Darcy's father is still alive. And Darcy's father's will puts into place this thing, because he likes Elizabeth so much, but she knows he has no prospects. So essentially, if she marries Darcy, she gets a £20,000 dowry. If she doesn't marry Darcy but does not marry anyone else before she turns 25, she gets £10,000. So because Mr. Bennet hadn't wanted to arrange the marriage, but the senior Mr. Darcy had wanted to put something in place to incentivize it, because he thought Lizzie would be really good for Darcy. But Darcy doesn't know any of this because his uncle, who's the executor of the will, doesn't tell him about it. And so there are some various misunderstandings when they meet again. So yeah. So that was fun. Now what else? Another Austen variation, The Meddling Matlocks by Catherine Bilson. So this one, a storm means that the Matlocks, the Earl and the Countess, Darcy's aunt and uncle, are stranded before they get to London near Meryton, and they go, oh, isn't Darcy staying somewhere near here? Yes. And then they realise, when they get to Netherfield, they stay overnight, and then they realise, oh, hey, is it Mr. and Mrs. Bennett who we used to know like back when we were in university? Don't they live near here? And it turns out they're old friends of the Bennetts that have lost touch. And then they just start meddling because they can see who actually would be good for each other. And they're like, yeah, we're going to meddle. So that was fun. I really, really enjoyed that one. Then I also read Uncanny Magazine issue 53, edited by Lynn and Michael Thomas. None of the stories in this one really, like, they were all good quality, but none of them really grabbed me. There was one that kind of did, that was, I can't even remember it at this point. Clearly it didn't grab me that hard. Like, there were interesting stories, but yeah, none of them really like grabbed me and didn't let go. Neither did any of the essays, even though there was actually one about by Elizabeth Miles that was kind of interesting, which I cannot remember the topic. It was probably Doctor Who. It's Elizabeth, but it might not have been. Oh, no, actually, no, that's right. It was a comparison of the Game of Thrones prequel, House of the Dragon, to the bit of British history it's most like, which is like Empress Matilda versus Stephen kind of thing. That was interesting. I did like that. And then the last thing that I finished was a physical book. Yay! And it was Selected Poems by Robert Burns. So this came about because there was a question about a poem, which isn't actually in this book, at one of my Friday quizzes at work, which one other person and I managed to stumble onto the answer because I'd kind of gone, oh, well, I've got no idea, but it sounds kind of romantic, so maybe it was one of the romantics, we could just go Byron. And then she went, I think I've heard it said in Scottish, like in a Scottish brogue. And then we went, well, if it's Scottish, maybe it's Robert Burns. I said, maybe it's Robert Burns. And it turned out to be, it was Robert Burns. And I had Robert Burns on my TBR shelf, and it was about to be Burns night. So I picked up this, and I started out reading it aloud. I had to stop doing that because it's all in Scots, like, dialect. And I'm really, really bad at speaking Scots dialect. I go into a really, really bad default Scottish accent, and it's just terrible. So I ended up reading the second half of it just to myself, like in my head, because it was quicker. But yes, I finished that. So overall, I read 2 books that were physical, so that's part of my goal. I read, I think, 1 book that had queer characters and 1 book that had an author of colour, I think. Although there were definitely queer characters in Uncanny Magazine, but I don't generally count that because it's multiple things. So I need to do a bit better on my diversity goals this month, which I plan to, because it's Black History Month, so I'm going to put together a bit of a TBR based on that. I did start make progress on a few other books that were on my TBR. I started and a decent chunk of it, like about a third or so of the way through of, what's it called? At the End of the River Styx by Michelle Kulicki, which is a physical book. And I did get a couple more chapters read of Decolonizing Methodology by Linda Tawai Smith. So those are in progress. And I have some ideas about what I might read in February. But we will see how we go. Anyway, yes, so that is what I read in January. I'm reasonably pleased with my progress to start the year. There's been some variety, as well as some, as usual. Yeah. No, two books with queer character. No, just 1. I'm confused. I'll figure it out later. So yes, please like and subscribe. And if you want to chat about any of these books in the comments with me, go ahead. Always happy to. And I will see you all again really soon. Bye.